What if you could build an entire application from the back end to the front end? In this video, we will use the Django and Flutter frameworks to build a complete full-stack project. We will start from scratch using Django, Python, Flutter, and Dart to create the simplest Flutter stack application you've ever seen.
Step number 1, Django and Python.
Alright, so the first thing you want to do is to open the terminal. So you can press Ctrl space and write terminal and press enter. Now we'll maximize this thing. And what you will need to do is write Python 3 -- version and press enter. So you see that I have Python 3. And if you don't have this, make sure that you install Python 3 first. The next thing you need is to create a virtual environment inside your computer. So for this, we will need to use something called the pipe-env, and we will need to install this. So we'll say pipe3 install pipe environment. So you can press enter and this will install pipe-env. Now it's time to create our entire project. So what I will do is I will cd inside my desktop and then I will create a file. So you will see that this will create a file in my desktop. I will say mkdir and the name of the project will be full project. Now if I double click, you will see that this full project is absolutely empty. But later we will fill this folder with a Django and a Python project. So once we have created our file, we can cd inside. So I will say cd full projects and press enter. If you remember, we have installed pipe environment, so we can use this pipe-env to install Django. And now because we have installed Django, you can go inside the full project and you will see that you have two files inside. But the next step is, as you can see, to activate this project virtual environment, you need to run the pipe environment shell. So we'll do just that, pipe environment shell, and press enter. And this virtual environment has been created inside this file. The next thing we want to do is to create the actual Django project. So for this, we will use the command Django admin start project, and then you will put the name of your project. To make things easy to understand, I will call this Django project. Enter. And now if you go inside the full project, you will see that we have some sort of problem. The thing is, we have one Django project and inside we have a subcategory called the same thing. But it will be better if everything that is inside this thing was also inside the first Django project. So for this, what we'll need to do is we'll delete the Django project, move to trash, and we will do the same thing. We'll say Django admin start project, Django project, but this time we will put the dot at the end and we will press enter. So now if we go back inside the full project and go inside the Django, you can see that everything is inside this file. So when you create your Django project, make sure that you put also a dot at the end. The next thing you want to do is to run the actual project on your local server. So you can say Python manage.py. If you go inside the file, you will see that this is the manage.py. And the reason we need to put the dot is because we don't want to have the manage.py inside the Django folder. We want the manage.py to be directly inside the full project. And then you can say run server and press enter. You will probably have some sort of error about migration. You don't really care about that because it will work anyway. The next thing you need to do is to grab this URL. And if you go in your internet and paste it inside, you will see this website. The install works successfully. Congratulations. The next thing we want to do is to run this from Visual Studio Code instead of running it from the terminal. And after this, we want to create our Python project. So what we will do is we'll use the Ctrl+C and this will quit the current Django project. So if you go back and you open a new tab with the same URL, you will see that this is not working anymore. But we will make it work with Visual Studio. So let's open a new Visual Studio tab and we will reach inside this full project. So what I will say is I will say open folder, go inside the full project and click open. At this point, you can close the terminal if you want. I will say terminate and I will maximize this page. Now what we need is to run the Django project on the virtual environment. What we'll do is we will open the command palette. So for this, you can go inside views and click command palette. And what we'll use is the Python interpreter. So you can click on this first one. After this, what you will need to do is to click on enter an interpreter path and we will need to put the path of the virtual environment. For this, you can open a terminal like this, new terminal, pipe-env, and we will use the double dash and say venv. Then you will press enter. This command will give us the path of the virtual environment. So you will take all of this, you will paste it inside the Python interpreter, and then you will use another slash. You will say bin/Python. And now you can press enter. The next thing we will do is we will close this terminal. Once you have closed the terminal, you can click again and open a new terminal. This time you would see that the full project is inside the source, this virtual environment. So this shows us that the Python interpreter worked properly. The next thing is to run the Django project from this virtual environment. So I will say Python manage.py run server, and you can press enter. At this point, you should see that Python is inside the terminal, that you still have some unapplied migration if it's the case. Again, we don't care about that. And finally, that the server is running on this URL. So if we go back inside the website and I restart, you will see that the website is once again available. Great. So we have run Django from our virtual environment. The next step is to create the Python project. And for this, we will need to open a new terminal. So you can press the little plus sign. Again, you can see that we are inside the virtual environment, and that is totally fine. The next thing will be to run Python manage.py, and we will say start app. Then you will need to put the name of your application. Just to make sure that this tutorial is simple, we will call this the Python project, and I will press enter. Now, if you go on the side, you have the Django project and the Python project. And with all of this, we have created our first Python and Django project. And to show our own HTML, the next thing we want to do is to replace this with our own HTML. So this brings us to
Step number 2, the visual.
Okay, so let's go back inside our Django project, setting.python. Inside this file, what we need to do is to add the Python project application inside the installed app. So what you will need to do is just add the name of your application. So for me, it is Python project. So now the Django project have access to the Python project. So what we will do next is we can minimize the Django project and go inside the Python project and go inside the section views.py. The views in Python is pretty much like a request and a response. So in other words, it's a request handler. And the request handler, what it does, it will return you the visual that you need. But the visual is not inside views. I know it's confusing. Sometimes we use views to display the visual of the user, but the views is really to handle your request. So if you want to display a visual, it's called a template. And the template is what the user will see. So we will go inside python.project and we'll say new folder. This one will be called templates. Inside template, what we can do also is to create a new file. This new file will be called main.html. Now that we have an HTML file, how do we display this information inside the Django website? So for this, we need to go inside views.python. And we have something already called the from Django shortcut import render. This will render the visual of the app, so the HTML. We will need to use this inside this view.python. So let's create a function that will return the visual of the app, which is the main.html. We will say my app, and inside we put the request. If you remember, a view.python is a request handler. So each time you go inside a page, you request the information of this page, and this will return you the HTML. So put the 2 points, and now you will need to return the render. And inside the render, you put the request, and then you put the name of the HTML file. So main.html. So at this point, when we will call the myApp function, this will render the HTML. But how do we tell Django that we want to render this thing? This will be handled with all the URLs. So if you go inside Python project and you create a new file, this one will be called urls.python. You don't have to call it absolutely URLs. This is just a convention. In this file, you will need to say from django.urls import the path. And we will use this later. Next, you will say from import views. This will import what is inside this file, the views.python. After this, you will need to create a URL patterns. And you will say this is equal to a list. Inside the list, we will put a path. The path will be the bridge between the URL location and the view page that you want to display to the user. So for now, the path will say it will be empty. And what we want to display will be inside the views urls.py.myapp. So now you have set up the URL patterns inside your Python project, but you need to also set it up inside the Django project. So you will go inside the URLs of the Django project, and if you scroll down, you will see that you need to first import the include and also add the URL pattern like this. So I will copy this, I will say Ctrl C, and I will first add the include like this. And what I will do is I will create another path. This one will direct directly to the home thing, and also we will use the Python projects.urls, and this will point directly to this urls.python. Okay, so now with all of this, if we restart the application, you can see that, okay, so I will open a new tab and you can see that this is not working anymore. And the reason it's probably because we have nothing inside the HTML file, the main.html. What we need to do next is to create a simple HTML. So I will say h1 and inside I will say Flutter map. So if you go back inside your project and now if you restart, you will see that it's still not working. So what I will do is I will quit this and I will rerun the Python manage run server just to see if it will work this time. So this shows us that we don't have any errors right now. So if I restart, you see that it is now working. But there is still 3 things that you must understand. By example, how do you send an argument from the view into the main.html? The next thing is, how do you put a path into this URL? And finally, we will change also the visual because this is pretty disgusting. So let's start by learning how to put arguments from the views. So what you will need to do is to open the curly brackets like this, and inside you can put anything. By example, I will say my name, and I will say Flutter map. So this is only a dictionary or a map, and you can access this information from the main.html. So I will go inside the main.html, and instead of saying Flutter map, what I will do is I will say my name is, and I will put the argument. So I will use double curly bracket and say name. So now if you go back inside the website, you will see that my name is Flutter map. Great, so this was how to put arguments from the views to the main.html. But the next question is, how do we handle the path? By example, if you go inside the Django.project URL, you see that the path to the Python project is nothing. So what we could do is we could say we need to write Python, and you need to put this thing also. So now if we go back in the project, you will see that this is not working, but we need to use Python and press enter. This will show the project. Okay, but you can go even one step further. You can go inside the URL of the Python project also and add another path. For example, this one could be API dash like this. And so if you go back inside the website, you will need to put also API. So this one is coming from the Django project and this one is coming from the Python URL project. And if you press enter, you will see the website is back. Great, so you can play with this as much as you want. By example, you can go inside the URL, remove all of this, and now you will see that in order to see the website, I will need to put just API and press enter. Okay, so for the sake of this project, what we'll do is inside the URL, I will put nothing inside. So now the website is inside this location. So the next thing we want to do is we want to put a better HTML. So behind the scene, what I did is I created an HTML like this. If you want, we can go over really quick. We have the document HTML, then we have the title. This is all the style of our application. After this, we have the name, which will be Flutter map. We have some link, the home and the pokedex. We can go inside. You will see we have the links, home and pokedex. Next, we have a section called pokedex with a simple description and a copy at the end. This is our website. So if you want, you can pause the video right now and replicate everything that is inside this file. But it's not super important. It's just for the visual of the application. Great. So now we are ready for the next step.
Step number 3, debug.
So if you want to play more with Django and modify things, you will need to be able to run it inside debug mode. So for this, what you can do is you can reopen the terminal, you can quit all of this. So we'll say Control C. You could just run it like this, run debugging like this. It will work if you use Python and then you select Django. So you can see that this runs the Django project at this location, which is the same we had previously. But now another thing we will do is a step further. We will go inside the configuration and I will press this little thing. I will use Python and then I will say Django. By doing this, we have created a launch.json file. So I will put this on the side for now. And the next thing I want to do inside this file, which is located inside the VS Code launch.json, this location, what I will do with this is I will change the port. So I will say 9,000. So if I close the application, I disconnect everything, and I rerun my Python Django, which is this file, the launch.json, and I press this little arrow, you can see this time when we go in the terminal that the location is on the port 9,000. So if I go back, you can see that the 8,000 is not working anymore, but the 9,000 is working. So this is a way to change the port and also to debug your own application. So let me show you what I mean by debugging your application. If you go inside the view.py and you add some code, by example, y is equal to 5 and h is equal to 7. And after this, you will need to put a breakpoint. And if you go back inside your website and you reset the website, you will see that this will stop at this line. And you can press continue. Great, so now I will remove the breakpoint, I will delete this thing, and we are ready for the next step.
Step number 4, get and post.
The goal of this project will be to have a Flutter application which you will be able to press two buttons, one to get and one to post. And all of this will be handled by Python and Django. So what I will do is inside the Python project, I will create a new file, and this one will be a database. So what I can do right now is I can just say paste, because behind the scene I have created a database.python. This is just for the sake of this tutorial. You can see that I created some sort of pokedex. We have the number of the Pokemon, and next we have the name, and after we have the type. So this is a basic JSON format called pokedex. If you want, you can just replicate this, and I will try to put a link in the description with the documentation of everything, so you could be able to just copy paste the code. Now that we have this database, we can use it to create get and post requests. So for this, we'll need to go inside the views.py, and we can just copy this thing once again right under. Instead of my app, I will say get data. So for this function, we don't want to render anything. We just want to return the data if you ask for it. In order to make get and post requests, we need to use the Django REST framework. So for this, you can open the terminal, and you don't want to be inside the Python one. You need to use a ZSH, by example, or something else, something which you can write inside. And the next thing we'll do is we will write pipe3 install, and we will say Django REST framework in one word, like this. So you will press enter. And now we should have access to the REST framework. But if you want to use it, you need also to add it inside your settings. So you will go inside Django project, settings, and we will add, right after the Python project, we will say the REST framework. So after adding this, I will go back inside the terminal and inside my Python project just to see if everything is still working. It seems to be fine. Great, so now we can create get and post requests. So the first thing we need to add is from the REST framework, we'll say .response, and this will be the import response with a capital letter, response, like this. Another thing we'll need to do is to use again the REST framework .decorators and import the API views. So let's first use the API views. You will go right before the definition get data, and we'll say at API views. You will open the bracket after the square brackets, and inside you will say get and post. The next thing will be to return the entire database, which is the pokedex. So for this, we will need to say from .import database. And I import database because this is the name of the file. After this, I can go inside the get data and write data is equal to database.pokedex. And when we do a get request, this will return the data. And in order to return the data, we need to use the response that we have import. So I will replace the entire render with the response function, and inside we will put the simple data. Great, so we created a get response, but we need to link this get data information with the path of our application. So I will go inside the URLs. Oh, this has a bug. So what I will do is I will disconnect the application, and instead I will run all of this without debugging because I don't really like it. Anyways, so what I will do is I will put my comma and I will copy this path right under, but this time, instead of returning the my app, we will return the get data. This one is the one we just created with the get and the post. You see, get data. So if we want to return get data, then the URL will be different. It will be, by example, pokedex/API or something like that. slash again. Great, so with this, I will go back inside the HTTP 9000. And what I will do instead is I will use the slash pokedex slash API. And this is what you should see, the Django REST framework. So at this point, we have created a Django and Python project that can handle the get and post requests. So the next thing is to create a Flutter app that can make get and post requests. And keep in mind that with all of this, even if we go back inside the root of our application, we still have our HTTP website. Anyways, with all of this, we are ready to jump into Flutter.
Step number 5, the Flutter app.
Okay, so we will go through this Flutter project as fast as possible. The first thing I did is inside the pubspec.yelm, you should have the DIO package inside your dependencies. Great. Next, inside the main, we have the material app, which have as the home the skeleton widget. And to make sure that you understand, we also have the application on the side. The skeleton is the way to handle the bottom navigation bar. Let's go inside it. So what we have is a list of page, the get page and the post page. The get page is this one and the post is this one. Next, we have a simple scaffold with the bottom navigation bar. The first item will return the get page and the second item will return the post page. This is very basic stuff. So let's start by talking about the get page. This one is inside the page folder, getPage.dart. So the logic goes like this. We have a scaffold with the app bar. The app bar is just the pokedex. Next, we have a future builder. This one will use the future get request. So let's go inside the get request. We have an async that use the DIO package, dio.get. This will get the URL of our website with the pokedex slash API. If you remember, it is this page. And after this, it will return the response.data. So this get request will return the information of the entire pokedex. After this, we use the build request to create some condition. If we are loading, then we will display a circular progress indicator. If we have an error, we will display the error. And otherwise, this is what we'll display. We will use the snapshot.data to create a map of string and dynamic. Next, we create a list of Pokemon with the parse pokedex. If we go inside this function, you can see that we receive the pokedex JSON, which is all of this information inside the website. And then with this, we will use the pokedex JSON. And for each element, we will create a Pokemon. And if you wonder what is inside the Pokemon.from JSON, so you can pause and copy this inside your code if you want. Great, so let's go back inside the parse Pokemon. This will return a list of Pokemons. So let's go back again inside the get page, and you will see that this will return you a list of Pokemon called the Pokedex. After this, we use a listview.builder to display each element like this. All of this is coming from our Django and Python project. After this, if you wonder how do I use all the image, this has been created inside the pubspec.yelm. We have the asset image, and inside a folder I have image with all of them. And to know which image is displayed into the application, we use the function getImageURL. So let's go inside. You will see that this is a simple switch case, and we use the information from the API. If you remember, we have the type, so grass, fire, or stuff like that. So we use this in order to display the correct image. So this was it for the get page. You can see this is all the code used. But now that we are able to use the get page, we want to create the post page. This one will do pretty much the same. We have also the future builder that use the function post request. But for the post request, what we'll do is we will use the DIO package.post. Again, we will use the same URL, but we will also request the data. And the data that we send is the number. By example, if I go inside the application, currently it is not working, but it will later. So what we'll do is we will enter a number, by example 50, and we will click on search. This will send the information 50 to the Django and Python project, and this will handle the information and return us the good Pokemon from the database. Again, we will need to set this up inside the Django project later. But for now, this is what we do. After this, we send also an option with the content type application JSON. So this is our post. This should return us a map or a dictionary of the information about this Pokemon. So that's why if we go down, you will see that we use the same logic. If we are waiting, then show the loading progress. Otherwise, if we have an error, show the error. And finally, we use the snapshot.data in order to parse a Pokemon. You can see the information sent is the data Pokemon. Again, don't worry because we will build this later later inside the Django and Python project. But for now, let's just go inside the parse Pokemon, and you can see that this receives a map string dynamic and the number of the Pokemon. This will return a Pokemon from JSON. For the image, we use the same getImage URL, which I showed you earlier. And after this, we create some sort of column with the text, the image, and 2 elevated buttons. One to request random numbers and one to request a specific number. You can see this is the application we have, the random button and the search button. Okay, so this was the post page. With this, we are ready to create the logic for the post request inside our Django project. So at this point, what we'll need to do is to go inside the Python project and the view.py. And our goal is to create some sort of logic for this getData function. I will paste what I created behind the scene and let me explain how it works. So we create a condition. If the request is a get, then we will do the same thing we did before. We will just return the response with the data of the database Pokemon information. But if instead it's a request method post, then we will do something else. Before we continue, I will put the two code side by side so you can understand how it works. So this is our Python and Django project, and this is our Flutter project. If you remember, inside the post page.dart, we have the dio.post. This dio sends also the data with the number of the Pokemon we want to search for. And we do this by sending the number as an argument. So if I go inside the post request, you see that this sends the Pokemon number, which this information is either set up randomly with the random button or is set up with the text field of the Flutter application. All right, so anyways, we send this number that we want to request. So what Django will do is it will say the data is equal to the request data, which is this information. Next, we will retrieve the number information by saying data.get the number, and the number is this key. So by doing this, we will have the information number. So the next thing we will do is to create a try exception. So what we try to do is first to convert the number into an int. If we try to do this and it fails, it will return this thing. And it could fail, by example, if the user is entering some words like this. And you click on search, then it will try to parse the number and it will not work. So it will go inside the exception. But what happens if the user put a correct number, by example, 100? If it's the case, then the number will be parsed correctly. And after this, the response data that will be sent back to the application will be a map like this. And the map will have the key Pokemon. The Pokemon will come from the database pokedex with the number sent from the application. So with this, we will return a response with the data of this Pokemon. But what if it doesn't work? What if the user enters something weird and it doesn't work? We go inside the exception. In this case, we will return this map. But this response data, which is inside the return response, don't have any key called Pokemon. And you will see why this is important in a couple of seconds inside our Flutter application. So if I maximize a little bit the application and we go down after the post request, which should return a response data, if we scroll down, we have a section called the Pokemon is using the function parsed Pokemon. So we use the data Pokemon, which is exactly this information. But when we have an exception, we don't have this key. And because we don't have this key in some exception, if we go inside the parse Pokemon, you will see that the parsed Pokemon, if it's null, then it will return a Pokemon and the name will be the number. So this is why when we go back inside the application and we search for something weird, the name of the Pokemon is the number. But if we have a real Pokemon, by example 100, and I click on search, this should return the Pokemon from JSON. So this should return the name of the Pokemon. And this is currently not working. So what I will do is I will restart the Flutter application just to see if it works. And you can see that we have some sort of error. And the reason why it's not working is you can see that the status code have some sort of problem. So if we go back inside the view.py, you can see that we use a status HTTP 2001 created. But in order to use this, we need to add it inside the import. So you will need to say from REST framework, import the status. So with all of this, we can reset our application. You can see that the Pokedex, everything is still working. So I will go back inside the Flutter app. I will restart all of this and I will go inside the post, and you can see that now it is working. So if I click on randomize, you can see that we have the name of the Pokemon, the type of the Pokemon, and we are able to do other search. By example, if I do 128, I know that this one will be Tauros, and it is working perfectly fine. So this is pretty much everything we have done in this video. So you see we have the 5 steps: Django in Python, visual, debug, get and post, and the Flutter app. And each of them is required in order to build the entire project. So first we had the Django and Python project. We created everything, and at the end we had this visual, so a basic Django project. After this, what we did is to create the visual, so at the end to have a different HTML, something different from this page. Green is for Django and blue is for Python. So inside Django, we had to change the settings and the URLs. We also went into Python. We modified the view to return the main.html. We went also inside the URLs to set up the path. And after this, we went into step number 3, debug. So I showed you how to create the port 9000. Next, we went into the section step number 4, get and post. Inside this one, we created our database.python, which have all the entire pokedex. And inside the views from the Python project, we added the get data. The get data was able to handle the get and post requests. Because if you remember, inside the view, this is really to handle requests. It's a request handler. With all this information, we were able to create a Flutter app and use the Dio package to get and post stuff from the Django and Python backend. And this was pretty much everything we did in this video. But if you want to learn more about backend framework, get ready, because in 2025, the Flutter Pro course is coming. But for now, just enjoy the YouTube video, and I see you in the next one. Bye.